That's nice. Both about the same age.
Yeah. So we're actually the same age for a few months. She turns 30 in the middle of the summer, and I turn 31 just after the high holidays.
Mhm.
Okay, we
But
shall.
does
Sorry?
Chabad give presents to their children on Hanukkah?
That is a very good question. Does Chabad give presents to their children on Hanukkah? The answer is yes. And the more prevailing custom is to give them money to help them learn about, first of all, responsibility with money, second of all, charity. And then, so what we'll do usually is give them money and then go to a store and let them choose out prizes.
On a birthday too?
On a birthday, usually we give presents, but I don't think it's a particularly religious thing. It's just, cultural.
Because your new child may have Hanukkah and her birthday on the same day. Poor
That's
kid.
true. Then they'll have to get extra presents.
Mhm.
Yeah, we shall see. That'll be a nice Hanukkah present for us. I don't know what happened to Brett. She just got bumped off the meeting.
Do you do on Hanukkah the Hanukkah gelt, the chocolates that are shaped like coins.
The chocolate gal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She probably went to the bathroom. There she is.
Okay. So. Okay. Um, so we are okay. So we're gonna first start out about when you have we're in the middle of a discussion about if you have various types of food in front of you, which one do you make the blessing on first? So we're gonna finish that discussion, but while we're talking about that discussion, we're going to get into a beautiful and wonderful new topic called spiritual purity and impurity. So if it'll go over your head, don't worry. But for now, let's jump right in. As Rav Yosef, and some say it was Rabbi Yitzchak, said, each food whose significance is manifest in that it precedes the others in this verse, which sings the praises of the Holy Land, takes precedence over the others in terms of blessing as well. So if you have different things in front of you and you're not sure which one you want to eat first, then we just look at the verse. A land of wheat and barley, vines, figs, and pomegranates, a land of olive oil and of honey coming from the dates. So let me ask you a question. If there's a piece of cake and a grape in front of you, which one should you make the blessing on and eat first?
The grape. No, the cake made out of wheat.
Oh, very good. The cake, if it's made out of wheat, comes first because the land is of wheat and barley, vines, figs, and pomegranates. So we make first the blessing over the cake and then over the grapes. Now, what's interesting is that the rest of the things in the verse, even if they have the same blessing, we still have a difference of we have a preference over what comes first. So if you have in front of yourself figs and olives, what do you eat first?
The figs.
The figs, very good. What about grapes and dates?
Grapes and what?
Grapes or dates?
Well, they both come from vines, don't they?
So the date is referred to by the word here, honey. The word in the verse, honey, when it says a land flowing with milk and honey, refers to date honey.
Date honey. Well,
Have you ever seen the Ceylon, they call it, I think?
The what?
Ceylon.
What is it?
It's like a date syrup, very, very sweet, and it's a great sugar alternative.
No, that's not.
Let's see. Ceylon. Up here. It's called date syrup. Oh, they have some in a gallon bucket. So they have this it's very good. You can try it and try it instead of honey or maple syrup. Adds a nice flavor to the dishes. Okay. So the Gemara notes that this opinion disagrees with the opinion of Rabbi Chanan. As Rabbi Chanan said, the entire verse was stated for the purpose of teaching measures with regard to different halachos in the Torah. And this verse has nothing to do with teaching you which blessing you make first. Rather, it's talking about certain measures. What measures are we talking about? Let's see. Wheat. Why do we need to know wheat? Wheat was mentioned as the basis for calculating the time required for one to become ritually impure by entering a house afflicted with leprosy. So let me ask you, have you ever seen a house afflicted with leprosy?
No.
Not lately.
I have.
Not lately. What is leprosy?
It's a
Skin
disease.
disease.
Right. What about Jewish leprosy? Or should I say biblical leprosy?
It's a disease. Same disease.
So biblical leprosy is actually different. I've never actually Googled what leprosy looks like. Regular
It's
leprosy.
got like boils and open sores.
Ew.
Yeah, definitely. You can
Yeah,
see
I'm
why they
sorry,
were.
guys. I'm
You can
gonna
see why
close
they
that.
were repulsed by it.
Sorry?
You can see why they were repulsed by it.
Yeah.
And they thought it was very contagious, even though it really isn't.
Interesting. So biblical leprosy is actually very different than that. It is a lesion that affects the skin, however, it's very different. If a person has a white blotch on their skin or a red blotch, sorry, yeah, a white blotch on their skin or a red blotch on their skin, that would be leprosy. So leprosy was a very spiritual disease in nature. It would come to a person either for being arrogant or for being a gossip monger, or things of that nature. And they would be confined or segregated from the community until they repented and the lesion was healed. The spiritual leprosy or whatever, the biblical leprosy could also affect clothing and could also affect homes. On clothing and on homes, the colors are green or red. So if there is a green blotch on a white piece of clothing or a red blotch on a white piece of clothing, then they would take that to the Kohen and get it evaluated to see what's going on. If a green blotch or a red blotch appeared on the walls of the house, then the same thing would happen as well. Now, interesting to note is that as part of the purification process, or as part of to see what's going on, the Kohen would come to the house and look at the house, and if it was indeed determined to be in need of quarantine, then they would take everything out of the house. The Kohen would say that it's impure, and then they would come back a week later and see if it spread or if it didn't spread. And if it did, then they would have to take out the stone, and if it continued spreading, they would have to knock down the entire wall. before the Jewish people took over the land of Israel, when they came in after their time in Egypt, the Amorites, or the Amori people, when they heard that the Jewish people are coming, they hid their treasures in the walls, and hoping that they would come back once they finished fighting with the Jewish people, and they would get back their stuff. Of course, the Jewish people took them over, and they never did come back. And there were these treasures in the walls that nobody knew about, and people would get this Hashem would send this leprosy sometimes to a person, not as a negative thing, but as a positive thing, that when they would break down the wall, they would find all these treasures inside. So a person who has leprosy, a clothing that has leprosy, and a building that has leprosy is considered spiritually impure. The person who has leprosy, if they touch someone, that person will contract the spiritual impurity. If a person touches the garment or carries the garment that has this impurity, they will become impure. And if a person enters a house which has the leprosy inside it, they will become impure. That is the background for the next part of the Mishnah that we're going to quote here. We're going to try and figure out what are we learning from the word wheat in the verse. As we learned in the Mishnah, one who enters a house which is afflicted with leprosy of the house, with his clothes resting on his shoulders, and his sandals and his rings are in his hands, both he and they, the clothes that are on his shoulder, the sandals and rings that are in his hand, immediately become ritually impure. However, if he was dressed in his clothes, his sandals were on his feet, and his rings were on his finger, he immediately becomes ritually impure upon entering the house. But the clothes, the sandals, and the rings that he is wearing, keyword here is wearing, remain pure until he stays in the house long enough to eat half a loaf of bread. This calculation is made with wheat bread, which takes less time to eat, and not with barley bread. And we are talking about someone who is reclining and eating the bread together with some kind of a dip or a something to go along with it, which hastens the eating. So we have now a Torah measurement that is connected specifically to wheat, which is the amount of time it takes for a person's clothing that he is wearing to become spiritually impure if he walks into a house that is a house that has leprosy. And that is the amount it takes to eat half a loaf of wheat bread with a dip. Barley. Barley is also used as a basis for a measure. As we learned in a Mishnah, there are various different things when it comes to impurity from death. There are different ways of contracting the impurity, and there are different types of impurity. So, for example, if there is 1 olive size of flesh from a corpse, that is impure and conveys impurity. However, if it's less than the olive size of flesh from a corpse, that does not impart impurity. If there is a half a bone, it could be a huge bone, it could be the femur, but if there's only a half a bone, so then it depends if there's an olive's worth or not an olive's worth. So if, how do we explain the rules of the 10? The way spiritual impurity works, specifically when it comes, or most specifically, when it comes to corpses, but there are other impurities as well that do this. If you are under the same roof as this impurity, then you or whatever else is inside that tent, whatever else is under that roof, would contract impurity as well. In order to impart impurity to everything else that's under the tent, you need to have a olive's worth of dead matter, shall we say. So where does barley come into this? Barley is used as a basis for a measure, as we learned in a Mishnah. A bone from a corpse that is the size of a grain of barley imparts ritual impurity through contact and by being carried. but it does not impart impurity by means of a tent, i.e., if the bone was inside a house, it does not defile all the articles of the house. So, even though this bone is less than an olive size, since it's a complete bone, it can contract and impart impurity if a person picks it up or if a person touches it. However, if there's a bone that is smaller than a barley kernel, that would not impart ritual impurity. So now we know wheat as a measure, barley as a measure. Wheat as a measure for how long it takes to eat a half a loaf of wheat is how long it takes for a person who is wearing clothing, for the clothing to become defiled when they enter a house which is impure from leprosy. Barley is used as a measure. The smallest bone that will impart ritual spiritually impurity is if it is the size of a barley kernel. Sorry, wine. What measure do we have about wine? The halachic measure determined by vines is the quantity of a quarter loig of wine for a Nazarite.
What is the log?
1 second. Interesting. A log is a Jewish measurement. About 12 ounces. Let's see. How many is in a log? No, that's a keg.
Why a Nazarite?
1 second. Here, let's look in over here. We have halachic measurements. Length, distance, volume, liquid. Here. One revius is usually 3.3 ounces, which would be 13 ounces is a log, and 1/4 of a log is 1 reviut. And its volume. So if we go back to here, a Nazarite, we've discussed Nazarites before, right? Someone who is not allowed to, someone who accepts upon themselves not to eat or drink anything that comes from the grapevine, not to come in contact with death or dead bodies, corpses, and not to cut their hair.
It said not to drink anything from the vine, but says a log of wine for a Nazarite.
Correct. So they are only culpable for lashes if they drink a quarter of a log. Now, what happens if they ate the shoots and the buds of the vine before they became into like it's kind of edible, or like grape skins and grape seeds and stuff like that? How do we determine that? Do we determine that with the liquid measure, or do we determine that with the solid measure? So the answer is that we go after the wine measurement, which is slightly different than the water measurement. Because wine is a little bit heavier than water and a little bit thicker than water. And therefore, the volume, understanding this exactly, if it's going by volume or by weight. Oh, okay, very simple. Okay, now I understand. If you have, where do I have my marker? Annotation here. Okay. So let's say they made let's make a glass. Let's make one over here. And one over here. And this is going to be like this. Okay. So we have two measuring glasses, and as you can tell, they're both exactly equal in size, correct? Good. So now, if we fill one up with water, what's going to happen? Who's our scientists over here? When you fill up a cup with water, what happens?
What do you mean, what happens?
What happens when you fill up a cup with water? How much water can you fit inside it?
Depends on how big the cup is.
Any cup. Can you fill it only until the lid or a little more?
Actually, you can very, very slightly more.
Very, very slightly more like that. But if you try it with wine, because wine is more dense, you can actually get a tiny, tiny little bit more than with the water cup. So with the water cup, you'll get a tiny little bit more than the lid. And with the wine cup, you'll get a tiny, tiny little bit more, or like an extra tiny little bit more. There's a name for it. I forget the name for this little bubble of water or liquid that goes on top of the cup. Someone will remind me what it is. So when we're talking about measuring the vine, when we're talking about measuring the shoots and leaves, if the Nazarite ate and how much did they eat, it goes by a revi'it, a quarter of a log, which is about 3.4 ounces, 3.2 ounces, somewhere around there, of wine and not of water, which is a slightly larger, tiny bit larger size than the amount of a water cup. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Now, how do I get rid of these annotations? Delete. Clear old drawing. Very good. What? I made a new one. Clear old drawings. Close the annotation. Okay. So that is the size that we learn about wine, that wine is the size that's used for measuring this quarter log, that it will be a little bit more wine than it would if it was water. Figs. Figs serve as the basis for the measure of a dried fig bulk, which is typically the smallest unit of food for which someone will be held liable for carrying out on Shabbat from one domain to another. Pomegranates teach us a particular measurement as well, as we learned in the Mishnah. All ritually impure wooden utensils belonging to ordinary homeowners become pure through breaking the utensil. How broken does the utensil have to be in order for it to be considered pure? And the answer is, well done, we have finished page 41a. We're getting closer. As an impure vessel loses its status as a vessel, and consequently its impurity when it can no longer be used. And the answer is, if it has holes that are the size of pomegranates, at that point they become ritually pure. What about a land of olive oil? Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Hanina, said that the verse should be expounded as follows: a land, all of whose measures are the size of olives. Because we know that olive is the most common used measurement when it comes to Jewish measures. The Gemara poses a question. Can it enter your mind that a land where all of its measures are the size of olives, aren't there those measurements that we mentioned above, which are not the size of olives? Rather say a land, most of whose measures are the size of olives, as most of the measures relating to forbidden foods and other matters is the size of an olive. And finally, honey, which is dates from which the date honey is extracted, also alludes to a measurement. With regard to Yom Kippur, one is only liable if they eat the equivalent of a large date of Yom Kippur. So, the Gemara asks, what about the other Amora who used this entire verse to teach me what comes first and what comes second when we're making blessings, and it goes in order of the verse. So where does he learn out all of these different size measures from? The Gemara responds, are these measures written explicitly in the Torah? Rather, they are by rabbinic law, and the verse is a mere support, an allusion to these measures. With regard to the halachas of precedence in blessing, the Gemara relates that Rav Chisda and Rav Amanuna were sitting at a meal. They brought dates and pomegranates before them. So you tell me, based on the law that we learned before, based on the verse that we said before, what should come first, pomegranates or dates?
Pomegranates.
Pomegranates. Dates was the last one in the verse. Rav Amanuna took and recited a blessing over the dates first. Rav Chisda said to him, does the master not hold that halacha which Rabbi Yosef taught, and some say it was Rabbi Yitzchak, that every food that precedes others in this verse precedes others in terms of the blessing as well? The pomegranate precedes the date in that verse. Rav Amanuna said to him, the date, is mentioned second to the word land in the verse, a land of olive oil and honey, just after the olive. And the pomegranate, is fifth to the word land. So what you see here is interesting. The word land is mentioned twice in that verse. It is a land of wheat and barley, vines, figs, and pomegranates, a land of olives and honey, olive oil and honey. So if we're counting by the word land, then dates come before pomegranates, because dates is second from the second word land, and pomegranates is fifth from the first word land. So Rav Chisda said to him admiringly, he will give us iron legs that we may serve you and constantly hear from your novel ideas. It was stated, if they brought figs and grapes before them in a meal, what blessings need to be recited? Rav Huna said they require a blessing before eating them and do not require a blessing after eating them, as the grace after meals exempts them. So this is a general question about dessert. What blessings do you have to make on dessert? So the answer is you have to make a blessing preceding it because it's not part of the meal, so your bread doesn't cover it. However, your grace after meals at the end will exempt these fruits and cakes, etc. And so too, Rav Nachman said they require a blessing before eating them, do not require a blessing after eating them. And Rav Shesha said they require a blessing both before eating them and after eating them, even if he ate them during the meal. As you have nothing which requires a blessing before eating it that does not require a blessing after eating it, because it is exempted by grace after meals, except for bread, a sweetened and spiced pastry that comes as dessert, because that too is the type of bread. The statements of both Rav Huna and Rav Sheshes disagree with the opinion of Rav Chia, as Rav Chia said bread exempts all the types of food that one eats after it, and wine exempts all types of drinks that one drinks after it, and one need not recite a blessing, nor before eating them, nor after eating them. So we have here a few different opinions. We have one opinion which is that dessert, you need to make a new blessing before eating the dessert. However, your grace after meals will exempt it. You have another opinion, which is that you need to recite over dessert, you need to recite its own before blessing and its own after blessing. And then you have the third opinion, which is that dessert does not need any special blessing, it's part of the meal. Summarizing, Rav Papa said that the halacha is, food items that come due to the meal, which are eaten together with the bread as part of the meal, and you're eating them during the meal, neither require a blessing before eating them nor after eating them, as they are considered secondary to the bread. And items like fruit that do not come due to the meal as part of the meal, but may be brought during the meal, require a blessing before eating them, and do not require a blessing after eating them. However, if it comes after you already finished your meal, they require a blessing before them and after them. The Gemara relates that the students asked Ben Zoma, why did the sages say that food items that come due to the meal during the meal, for example, chicken soup, is coming because of your meal and it's becoming during your meal, neither requires a blessing before eating it nor after eating it? And he said to them, because the bread exempts them. They asked, if so, bread should also exempt wine. Yet we know that one recites a blessing over the wine during the meal. And the Gemara answers, wine is different. Oh, there we go. Page 41b in the books. As it causes a blessing itself. It is so significant that one recites a blessing over it together with other blessings like Kiddush and Havdalah. Even though he does not particularly care to drink it. During a meal, too, a blessing is recited over the wine, and wine is separate and special and not exempted by blessings over the bread. The Gemara mentioned before bread that comes as dessert. So now we're going to talk more about this kind of bread. So, I don't know what happened over there. Oh, whoops, I forgot. I was supposed to go yesterday somewhere. Pick up a new chair for my office. Okay, well, I'm just going to quickly write this down over here. Where is this? Okay, I'll write it down over here. Okay. We mentioned that bread we have to make hamotzi. We mentioned that cakes and cookies, we make the blessing mezonos. The blessing mezonos is the one that's made over cakes, cookies, and the translation of that one was who creates various kinds of nourishment. The question is, at what point do we draw the line between bread and cake? What do you think?
If you can put pastrami between it, it's bread.
If you can put pastrami between it, it's bread. Okay. What does Chaim say?
Not the sugar in it.
How much sugar is in it? Okay. So let's see. We're going to get into this discussion, and I think that over here we may have a long discussion about it. It is one of the most complicated portions when it comes to Jewish law is the blessings over food. And one of the most complicated parts of blessings over food is this section called bread that comes in pockets. That's the that's the name that people refer to this discussion by. Let's jump in. We have 4 minutes. Let's see how far we get. Because the Gemara mentioned bread that comes as dessert, it now relates that Rav Huna ate 13 substantially sized sweetened loaves. Okay, so Chaim, they were sweetened loaves. According to Chaim, that would be considered cake. There's a lot of sugar. According to Zalman, perhaps that would not be considered bread because it's sweetened. You don't put pastrami in a sweetened loaf. Each loaf had a third of a kav of flour. And he did not recite grace after meals because they were not genuine bread. Rav Nachman said to him, you didn't eat dessert, you ate lunch. That is hunger. One does not typically eat that much merely as dessert. Rather, over anything which is substantial enough to satiate, and others may base their own meal upon it, one must recite grace after meals. So the distinction over here between bread and cake is, do you eat it as a meal? Are you eating a meal or are you eating a snack? If you're eating a snack or a dessert, so then that will be considered cake. If you're eating a meal, then that would be considered bread. So from the fact that he ate that much, we could tell that he is now eating a meal. He's eating lunch. He's not just taking a snack. The Gemara also relates that Rav Yehuda was engaged in preparation for his son's wedding at the house of Rav Yehuda bar Chaviva when they brought bread that comes as dessert before them. When it arrived, he heard them making the blessing, Hamotzi, who brings forth bread from the earth. He said to him, what is this tzitzi sound that I hear? Perhaps you are reciting who brings forth bread from the earth? They said to him, yes, indeed, as it was taught in a brisa. Rabbi Mona said, in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, over bread that comes as dessert one recites who brings forth bread from the earth. And Shmuel said that the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Mona. So even though this bread is dessert, it's dessert bread, we're eating it, and so we're going to make this bread, the bread bracha, hamotzi. Rav Yehuda said to them, you are mistaken. Actually, it was stated that Shmuel said the halacha is not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Mona. You missed one word. The word not over there is very important. Which would mean that these kind of dessert breads would not be considered hamotzi. You would recite mizonos over them, which is the blessing who creates various forms of nourishment. We're going to call it, we can call it the cake blessing if we want. Rav Yehuda said to them, you are mistaken. Actually, it was stated that Shmuel, they said to him, but aren't you, master, the one who said in the name of Shmuel in regards to wafers? One may establish an eruv, a joining of the courtyards, to permit carrying in a shared courtyard, and the joining of cooked foods to permit cooking on a festival for Shabbos with them, with these wafers, and recite over them who brings forth bread from the earth. Why over wafers would you say the blessing hamotzi? They too are sweetened bread that comes as dessert. He answered them, it is different, because over there they're basing their meal on it. And if they're basing their meal on it, then you will make hamotzi. But over here, that you're just snacking on it, then you do not recite hamotzi, you recite the cake blessing. So, we're going to pause over here. Tomorrow, we're going to learn all about Noah. Some lessons from the flood and from him. That'll be at 11 o'clock here in the Chabad house. And wishing you all a wonderful day, a wonderful rest of your week. And hopefully we'll see you either tomorrow or Shabbat or next week, Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you.